Welcome to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Thursday, January 30th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:05 a.m. It set at 5:02 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, cloudy becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon on Thursday. Friday, partly cloudy. Warmer on Thursday, moderate west to northwest winds on Thursday. The low temperature, 23 degrees. The high temperature, 27. Today's headline, Bear More Steps to War. Washington, D.C., January 29th. The federal government is paying for a survey made by the National Research Council into a new enriched bread-making flour, now compulsory in wartime Britain. The council, which is a subsidiary of the National Academy of Sciences, said the flour would help the American people withstand the strains and stresses of war or threats of war. The flour was developed by the millers several months ago for sale to the public, but the government ordered the survey in order to arrange for adequate amounts at the earliest possible time. The Federal Food and Drug Administration is drafting regulations to govern use of the new food. The flour is enriched with vitamin B1, thiamine, iron, and a pellagra-preventing factor, nicotinic acid. Washington, D.C., January 29th. The Senate committee considering President Roosevelt's dictator bill was stirred today by the revelation that the War Department has ordered 4.5 million medical tags for identifying men killed and wounded in battle, and that President Roosevelt has requested the American Red Cross to have ready 4 million surgical dressings by April. Both actions were assailed by committee members as additional steps toward war. The casualty tags are made of linen, shaped like shipping tags, have a wire to fasten to the clothing of a soldier, and provide space for describing the nature of the casualty. The clouds of war seem to hang very low in the marble-pillared magnificence of the hearing chamber as these facts were made known with Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson on the witness stand. Stimson had spent the morning praising the president's war dictatorship bill, which gives the president the constitutional powers exercised by Congress over the nation's purse and sword. Stimson declared that the legislation probably is the last step which could be taken by the United States without actual involvement in the war. The War Secretary was taken aback when confronted by Senator Arthur H. Vandenberg, Republican Michigan, with a question about the Army order for 4.5 million dead and wounded tags. Stimson said at first he knew nothing about the contract. Does this mean we are contemplating an army of 4.5 million men? Asked Vandenberg. No, not today, Stimson replied. We are planning for an army of 1,400,000 men and eventually an army of 2 million. Will you provide us with a memorandum on this tag order? Vandenberg asked. I think you'll agree that it excites curiosity. And now for world news. Athens, Greece, January 29th. An iron determination that its policies will be carried on was sounded unanimously in Greece tonight as the nation, which is fighting Italy for its life, mourned its iron dictator Premier General John Metaxas, who died this morning at the age of 70. While throngs of Athenians gathered in the National Cathedral to pay tribute to the man who was premier for life, his successor, Alexandros Chrysis, pledged through King George II to continue the war until victory over the enemy and afterward the serving and promoting of the working classes, which constitute the productive power of the nation. That was the legacy of Metaxas, whose dying words, "I place my hope in Greece," voiced his firm confidence that Greece would fight on. For 3 weeks, Metaxas had fought a throat ailment in secret while his countrymen battled the Italians. On Sunday, blood poisoning developed and he was given 3 blood transfusions in the next 2 days. However, the stout heart, which, as the king said, trumpeted a proud no to the brazen invaders on October 28th when Italy invaded Greece, has failed. Bitold, Yugoslavia at the Albanian frontier, January 29th. Italian bayonet attacks on Greek positions in the Divol River Valley and Greek assaults on Italian positions in the Shkumbi River Valley were reported tonight, but the battlefront in Albania was said to be generally unaltered. Positions changed several times in the Divol Valley with heavy losses on both sides. The Greeks, however, were said to hold several heights won in the last fighting of the day. Athens, January 29th. Greek frontline troops were reported today to have beaten back 2 more counterattacks from bolstered Italian defense lines north of Klissura. Rome, January 29th. Italian troops have captured an important position from the Greeks on the Albanian battlefront, the High Command said today. The communique also reported the Italian Air Force struck heavily at Salonika at the head of the Aegean Sea and at the railway from Salonika to Athens. Cairo, Egypt, January 29th. Royal Air Force planes leading the way for the British Desert Forces aimed at a cleanup of the Libyan port of Derna were reported by the RAF command to have ground-strafed fascist troops retreating all the way to Bars, 100 miles west of Derna. With British mechanized forces reported south and west of Derna and threatening Italy's hold on all eastern Libya, the fascist retreat indicated Premier Mussolini's men apparently had decided against making a fight of it at Derna. Instead, observers here believed the Italians would move on past Bars and make a stand at Benghazi, 150 miles beyond Derna on the western side of the Cyrenaican Hump, which juts into the Mediterranean. Aboard a British warship at Tobruk, Libya, January 29th. Approximately 1,000 German technicians and airmen now are stationed in Libya to aid the Italians against the British, an Italian prisoner said tonight. This prisoner was one of thousands pouring into Tobruk to board British transports shuttling steadily between this captured fascist port and Egyptian bases. When the British forces began their operations intended to reduce Derna, columns of Italian troops were leaving areas west of Tobruk in lorries bound for that town. They were caught in furious attacks by the Australians near Derna and are said to have surrendered in masses. Reports received here say that 10,000 Italians have been taken in the British drive westward from Tobruk. In Tobruk Harbor is the wreckage of 17 Italian ships sunk or damaged by British bombing and British shelling, including the old cruiser San Giorgio and 3 destroyers whose masts stick up from the water. The passenger steamer Liguria is still burning. Rome, January 29th. A British armored division striking into Libya south of the port of Derna was beaten back by Italian troops, the High Command reported today, with noteworthy losses. A British attack also was beaten back in the Galabat sector along the Sudanese-Ethiopian frontier, the High Command said, and Italian troops attacked other British forces along the Kenya frontier. London, January 29th. Flares, explosive, and firebombs fell upon London tonight in an intermittent 4-hour German air raid, the first to scar the city in 10 nights. The all-clear sounded before 10 p.m. Casualties were reported, not numerous, and damage slight. Nazi big guns at the same time bombarded the Dover Strait from across the English Channel. No casualties were reported in Dover. In a widespread assault, Nazi raiders also were over the western and northern sections of England, East Anglia, central Scotland, and the northeast coast. In one northeast coastal town, machine gun bullets spattered in the streets just as the people ran at dusk to the air raid shelters. The day had been one of scattered stabbing German forays. At least 5 persons were reported killed by 3 bombs dropped by daylight raiders along the Thames estuary. Bombs fell too at 2 points in the outskirts of London itself, but it was said officially that in these instances there were very few casualties. Bulgaria. It is reported to be scarred but on the fence. German officers, mechanics, and technical troops are said to be entering the country dressed as civilians and preparing airfields. They are backed up by 8 to 10 German divisions in Romania. A German mechanized division numbers 11,000 men and an infantry division 15,000. A German thrust through Bulgaria to the Aegean Sea, aided by a strong concentration of bombers, would present a formidable problem for the Greek army and a threat to close the eastern Mediterranean to large British convoys. Yugoslavia. It has the finest army and air force in the Balkans, and as far as is known here, would not consent to the passage of German troops for a thrust at Salonika to cut off the Greeks from the rear. North Africa. The British commander can no longer afford to take the chances he did because of the presence of the German Air Force in Italy and Libya. The matter of supporting Wavell, the commander, has become more difficult. Turkey. Declared to be ready to fight if the Germans should attempt a sweep across Anatolia and Syria against British forces at Suez. We are in a position to give Turkey considerable help, the spokesman said. London, January 29th. A high British military authority today gave a survey of the military position of Great Britain at home in the Mediterranean and the Far East. He evaluated Britain's strengths and weaknesses and estimated Germany's possible future strategy. On the home front, the authority said Britain faces 3 dangers: intensification of the war on shipping, intensification of night air attacks and invasion, but the authority suggested the expected early German attempt at invasion might be abandoned because of the necessity of considerable Nazi help for Italy and because of the drain caused by German activities in the Balkans. If the Germans attempt an invasion of England, he said, they will time it to begin before American aid becomes too pronounced and before possible American entry into the war draws nearer. Berlin, January 30th. Headlines in the morning press announced that Adolf Hitler will speak to the German people over the radio at 4:30 p.m., 8:30 a.m. Chicago time. The occasion will be the 8th anniversary of the National Socialist Party's rise to power. What Hitler will talk about was not announced, but it may be assumed that the United States and the pro-British agitation there will receive attention. The German thesis appears to be that only aid from the United States can enable Britain to carry on the war. It would not be surprising, therefore, were the Führer to comment on the so-called Lend-Lease plan and recent statements of American leaders. Spain. The government would prevent, if possible, any German move through the country to Gibraltar to close the western end of the Mediterranean and gain a passage to Africa. To force their way through Spain, the Germans would run the risk of overextension in a hostile country, the spokesman asserted. France. The Germans might occupy the rest of France, but Marshal Pétain might order the fleet to North Africa to join General Maxime Weygand and assume the war from there. Italy. Germany cannot afford to let her fall out of the war, the authorities said. As a result, German troops and aircraft are moving through Italy at considerable numbers. Yugoslavia. It has the finest army and air force in the Balkans, and as far as is known here, would not consent to the passage of German troops for a thrust on Salonika to cut off the Greeks from the rear. Berlin, January 29th. Berlin's afternoon newspapers gave prominence today to a statement of Henry Morgenthau Jr., United States Secretary of the Treasury, that there is nothing for England to do but stop fighting if the Aid to Britain bill is not passed by the United States Congress. They said the statement confirms the German view. Rome, January 29th. Virginio Gaeta, foremost editorial spokesman for fascist Italy, declared today that the United States policy of aiding Britain is a violation of neutrality likely to involve the United States in war through legitimate reaction of the Axis powers. The increase of American aid to England, far from not drawing the United States into war, brings her nearer the conflict by deliberate plan, Gaeta wrote in Il Giornale d'Italia. The United States, he declared, should not believe she can continue this policy without finding some unforeseen and quite unpleasant reaction at the end of the path. Gaeta said Cordell Hull, United States Secretary of State, must have known that the policy of the North American government long has been violating the elementary principles of neutrality. Bucharest, Romania, January 29th. Romania was warned today by her pro-German newspapers to declare immediately a one-year truce upon all ideological conflicts because of the international situation. One article, speaking of reports of intensified Soviet-Russian armament, declared we cannot afford experiences at home when there are signs of a storm in the neighborhood, even though we do not know in which direction it will rage. Another article predicted that the motorized German army will sweep through the Balkan Peninsula like a hurricane within a short time to deliver a blow so crushing that the enemy will never recover its sense. The Ministry of the Interior announced that casualties in the Iron Guard revolt last week totaled 370 dead and 444 wounded in Bucharest alone. A special list issued tonight showed that 498 Iron Guardists had been arrested thus far for fomenting last week's revolution. Mexico City, January 29th. Informed sources said tonight that President Avilo Camacho had urgently ordered Ambassador Castillo Nájera to return from Washington, D.C. for a series of conferences preparatory to the signing of an agreement settling all outstanding issues between Mexico and the United States. Conversations have been held recently between Castillo Nájera and Undersecretary of State Sumner Welles regarding settlement of claims for lands expropriated from the Americans in Mexico and various other pending problems. Washington, D.C., January 29th. Repercussions of the Roosevelt administration's removal of the moral embargo against shipments of airplanes and aeronautical equipment to Russia hit Congress today when Representative George H. Tinkham, Republican Massachusetts, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, charged the administration with putting the United States on the road to war. Homicidal communistic Soviet Russia made war on Finland, occupied half of Poland with their army, and annexed by force Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, Tinkham said on the House floor. She has been a most brutal aggressor. President Roosevelt and Secretary of State Hull have repeatedly denounced aggressors, but apparently copying the European technique of playing favorites, homicidal communistic Soviet Russia now becomes their favorite. Seen as approval in the eyes of the world, their recent action will be taken to mean that the United States gives approval to the territorial gains of Soviet Russia and to the methods which she has employed in their acquisition. Apparently it counts for nothing when, with President Roosevelt and Secretary of State Hull, that communistic Soviet Russia is burrowing from within, plotting the collapse of the social and economic structure of the United States and the world. Must the integrity and well-being of the United States be sacrificed to the fantastic ambitions and calamitous intentions of President Roosevelt and Secretary of State Hull to redesign the pattern of world affairs, even by resort to fire and sword? Morals have gone as neutrality has gone. Both have disappeared from the foreign policies of the United States. The United States has been set on the road to war bereft of character and moral standing. London, January 29th. More than 60 women today staged a food demonstration in the swanky Savoy Hotel. One of the witnesses was Wendell Willkie, who had lunch with Sir Robert Kindersley, chief of the government war savings campaign, and other business heads. The women, for the most part, were well dressed. Some wore smart fur coats. They entered the hotel lobby by twos and threes, reached the dining room, sat down at tables reserved for others, and over the protests of waiters began ordering food. It is against the law for hotels to refuse to serve guests, and the maitre d' hotel told the women they would have to wait because every table had been reserved and he could not give them preference. London, January 29th. A proclamation today compelling youths 18 and 19 years old and men of 37 to 40 to register for military service, coupled with a conference on industrial manpower led by Minister of Labor Ernest Bevin, from part of a new scheme to put every fit man in the nation from 18 to 41 in the forces or in work of national importance. On top of this, Bevin also made another appeal to women to volunteer for work to replace men taken from key industries for military service. Bevin today met representatives of the Trades Union Congress, Federation of Employers, and other government officials to lay down a program for the coordination of military and industrial manpower requirements. Lord Beaverbrook, Minister of Aircraft Production, Sir Andrew Ray Duncan, Minister of Supply, A.V. Alexander, First Lord of the Admiralty, and Captain Oliver Lyttleton, President of the Board of Trade, attended the conference. London, January 29th. A demand that oats consumed by racehorses in wartime be diverted to human consumption was rejected by Major Gwilliam Lloyd George, a parliamentary secretary of the Board of Trade and son of David Lloyd George, World War Prime Minister, in the House of Commons today. Replying to questions by D.L. Lipson, an independent party member, Lloyd George said that the government has not thought it necessary to stop horse racing entirely. London, January 29th. Reports from Lancashire tonight disclosed that coal pits in that area were being closed because of a lack of miners and that cotton mills were being shut from lack of coal. At the same time, thousands of miners in the Durham area were workless and pits were lying idle. Operators and miners leaders said attempts to transfer the miners from Durham to Lancashire had failed because of the men's reluctance to leave their hometowns. In the House of Lords, all parties criticized the government for the coal shortage muddle. The Earl of Listowel condemned the deep-seated maladjustment of the system of transportation and distribution. London, January 29th. Lord Somers, Deputy Chief Boy Scout for Great Britain since 1936, was appointed Chief Scout of the United Kingdom today in accordance with the wishes of Lord Robert Baden-Powell, the founder, who died 3 weeks ago. Lord Somers, 53 years old, served in the World War and was acting governor of Australia in 1930-31. Lord Hampton, Chief Scout Commissioner, said, "There will never be another World Chief Scout to succeed Lord Baden-Powell. We feel," he said, "that title should be kept for our chief and founder for all time." London, January 29th. The government disclosed tonight that 12 persons were killed and 6 injured in Britain last week when various unexploded missiles, picked up mostly by souvenir hunters, went off. London, January 29th. A committee is being set up to investigate land speculation by brokers buying up bombed sites to resell to municipalities after the war, the government announced today in the House of Commons. A CBS broadcast from London yesterday said that the fire-ruined city or financial section was undergoing the most hectic land speculation activity in its history. The speculators hope that when the time comes for reconstruction in London, they will be able to name their own price for the land which they have snapped up while it remained useless, the broadcaster said. Paris, January 23rd, via Berlin delayed. Negro jazz players who have been entertainers for 20 years in Mortrammeyer nightclubs are among Americans returning home. One group of Americans left January 20th, and 3 other groups are expected to go soon. Berlin, January 29th. The German High Command's documentary film Victory in the West was shown today to the press, but it left unanswered the question whether Germany has a secret weapon. The film account of France's defeat was revealed a huge amount of mechanical war equipment, but how it went to work on such tough defenses as the Maginot Line and Belgium's supposedly invincible fortress Ibn Emil remained the High Command's secret. The film indicated that the German triumph in the West was no walkaway, that there was spirited resistance by the French, especially in the Maginot Line, and by the British and Belgians. German predominance in heavy artillery, the fleetness and mobility of her mechanized forces, and precise cooperation of all arms of the service were strikingly pictured. Some shots showed flamethrowers in action. Dublin, Ireland, January 29th. Eamon de Valera, Ireland's premier, told the nation by radio tonight that it must prepare for the worst on the question of imported supplies. De Valera said Ireland had been in danger of military attack and would remain in danger until peace returned to Europe. He warned the nation to build its defenses. The other danger now is the economic one, he went on. The belligerents in blockading each other are blockading us. We have not a moment to lose in preparing for the worst in regard to all those supplies that come to us from abroad. De Valera announced that tea supplies to the public would be restricted to 3/4 the quantity normally sold until a rationing system can be arranged. The premier said Ireland's wheat reserves hardly were enough to carry the country through until the next harvest, and he urged substitution of potatoes for flour in Irish diets. He warned farmers that they would have to slaughter cattle unless they grow the fodder that formerly came from abroad. Madrid, Spain, January 29th. At least 6 persons were reported killed in riots involving soldiers in Algiers, capital of the French African Protectorate of Algeria. Dispatches from the Tangier Morocco International Zone said tonight. First reports described incidents as grave. Soldiers were said to have broken out of the garrison, mortally wounding 6 persons. Some were rounded up, but others were said to have made good their escape. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, January 29th. The Yugoslav weekly news feature magazine Novi Svet was suppressed today, and police acting for the Ministry of Interior confiscated 10,000 copies containing an article about Colonel William J. Donovan, President Roosevelt's special envoy to Europe. The article was non-political and was devoted mostly to a biography of Donovan. It is understood the censor objected to references to Donovan's conferences with Prince Regent Paul and to a Serbian farewell to the American. It was goodbye, good luck, till we meet again. The confiscated copies of the magazine may be released tomorrow, it is said, if the objectionable portions of the article are removed. Havana, Cuba, January 29th. Fifth column activity and anti-democratic manifestations were outlawed in Cuba by a decree signed tonight by President Fulgencio Batista. The decree outlaws and dissolves all organizations with international connections engaging in propaganda against Cuba. It was understood the decree would be enforced immediately to dissolve the Spanish Falangist fascist group here and that the Communist Party would be outlawed. Havana, Cuba, January 29th. Rafael Calzadilla, Cuban lawyer, was arrested by secret police today on a charge that he had expressed himself as favoring the admittance of Cuba as a state of the United States. Calzadilla, president of the Bar Association of Guanabacoa near Havana, was said to have sent to the United States Senate the association's approval of a resolution proposing statehood for Cuba. And now back to national news. Washington, D.C., January 29th. A proposal to place an outright ban on the use of United States naval vessels to convoy supplies to Britain was rejected by the House Foreign Affairs Committee today as it neared the end of its consideration of the Lease-Lend program for aiding countries battling the Axis. The committee did, however, approve an amendment stating that the measure neither authorizes nor permits the use of American vessels as convoys. This action was taken with the approval of the administration members. The committee also adopted amendments fixing June 30th, 1943, as the expiration date for the Presidential Powers Bill contains. As the expiration date for the presidential powers the bill contains, requiring that the president make periodic reports to Congress on the Lease-Lend program and stipulating that he consult the ranking officers of the Army and Navy before sending any war materials abroad. Springfield, Illinois, January 29th. Congress will be asked to defeat the dictatorial Lease-Lend bill if a joint resolution introduced in the Illinois House today by Representative Lottie Holman O'Neill, Republican Downers Grove, is adopted. In the preamble to her resolution, Mrs. O'Neill declared that the highly controversial measure would vest in President Roosevelt unprecedented powers of disposition of the military and naval resources of this nation. It is the considered judgment of highly regarded statesmen, educators, and observers of international affairs, she continued, that the enactment of this bill will be tantamount to a congressional surrender of all its constitutional power to define and enforce the peacetime status and relationship of this country to nations at war, and will in the near future directly involve us in the conflict now raging in Europe. The resolution was referred to the House Executive Committee. Washington, D.C., January 29th. President Roosevelt, who is seeking an unlimited blank check to carry forward the war against Germany, Italy, and Japan, was rebuked by the House Appropriations Committee today for improper expenditure of part of the $200 million blank check already given him. Not within the memory of the oldest denizen of the Capitol has a president been reprimanded by a committee of Congress dominated by members of his own party. The rebuke was contained in the committee's favorable report to the House of the Independent Offices Appropriation Bill for the 1942 fiscal year, totaling $1,404,576,838. When the German blitzkrieg in the Low Countries last spring startled the administration into feverish activities, the president obtained from Congress a $200 million blank check for emergency defense expenditures, of which $100 million was in cash and $100 million more was allowed for contract authorizations. The current bill, it is proposed to vote the president another $100 million in cash and $25 million more for contract authorizations. In recommending the allowance of these additional amounts, the committee nevertheless admonished the president for expending emergency funds for non-emergency purposes, for which he properly should have asked specific appropriation by Congress. While it is not the purpose, said the committee, to hamper or obstruct the president in the expenditure of this new $100 million emergency fund, the committee feels very strongly that it should be reserved for use in connection with items which are unusually emergent in character, which are of prime importance to our national defense, and which require immediate action on the part of the chief executive. During hearings on the bill, the attention of the committee was called to allocations from emergency funds for activities which were not so intimately connected with national defense that a specific appropriation could not have been requested from Congress in the usual way. The text of the hearings released by the committee with the report of the bill shows that it was Representative Richard B. Wigglesworth, Republican Massachusetts, who voiced the original criticism of the president. Washington, D.C., January 29th. Pleading for another boost in the public debt limit, Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau Jr. today outlined to legislators dangers in the federal government's fiscal condition. Morgenthau appeared before the House Ways and Means Committee in support of a bill to boost the statutory limit on the federal debt from $49 to $65 billion. His testimony produced the following developments. Number one, he indirectly admitted that the federal government will reach a situation by the end of May such that it will be unable to meet its obligations unless the debt limit is raised. Number two, an increase in the limit to $63 billion would only last, or $65 billion would only last through June 30th, 1942. Number three, touching on inflation fears if bank deposits are increased further by sales of government obligations to banks, Morgenthau outlined plans for selling savings bonds, certificates, and stamps to individuals and financing national defense. Number four, the Treasury will be ready to consider a new tax bill after March 15th. And number five, while the pending bill would subject all federal obligations to all federal taxes, the Treasury next will ask reciprocal taxation of federal, state, and municipal obligations. Providence, Rhode Island, January 29th. The Evening Bulletin says today in a dispatch from Savellan Brown III, its Washington correspondent, that it has learned from reliable congressional sources that Colonel Charles A. Lindbergh is seriously considering running for a seat in the United States Senate or House of Representatives in 1942. The bulletin says that during his appearance last week to testify before the House Foreign Affairs Committee on the Lend-Lease bill, Lindbergh broached the subject to several congressmen. The bulletin's informants said that Lindbergh might decide to run for any of the 5 states with which he has some connections. Washington, D.C., January 29th. The War Department today issued new regulations governing admittance to its offices and designed to provide greater protection to the offices and files against spies. Effective February 1st, admittance to the building will be restricted, the department said, to persons on duty there and those who have official business to transact. Furthermore, solicitors and peddlers will not be permitted in the building. During regular office hours, employees admitted must show authorized badges bearing their photographs or badges certifying that they are temporarily on duty at the department. Callers without such badges will be required to report at once to an information and reception office where their business can be checked and visitors' badges issued to those on approved missions. Little Rock, Arkansas, January 29th. Annoyed over lobbyists occupying their seats, members of the Arkansas Senate provided a row of chairs set upon high standards and labeled with red signs saying lobby. Senator W.H. Abington, who drafted the resolution for the seats, complained that his chair particularly had been appropriated by outsiders. However, no lobbyists claimed the gallery seats, so Senate pages without chairs dismantled them and took them over. Washington, D.C., January 29th. Legislation to curb strikes on naval defense projects and outlaw attempts to compel workers on such projects to join or refrain from joining labor unions was introduced today by Chairman Carl Vinson, Democrat, Georgia, on the House Naval Committee. The measure, patterned in some respects after the National Railway Mediation Act, would make strikes on naval projects unlawful until 30 days after a Naval Defense Labor Board had filed a report on the merits of the dispute. Naval contractors involved would be prohibited from making any change in wage rates or other working conditions of their employees during the same period. Preparing for the release of a vast volume of clothing and equipment orders, the House of Representatives at Washington, D.C. yesterday voted to make $175 million available to the Army for placing advance contracts and sent the resolution to the Senate for concurrence. The Army, meanwhile, released a large number of contracts, including the following awarded to Chicago area companies: International Harvester Company, trucks, $668,546. General Bronze Company, hangar doors, $65,273. Ditto Incorporated, duplicating machines, $96,831. Reliance Manufacturing Company, khaki cotton trousers, $62,921. Sears Roebuck and Company, khaki cotton shirts, $5,821. George B. Carpenter and Company, cotton duck, $3,099. Monarch Pennant Company sleeve insignia, $20,993, and Mercury Manufacturing Company electric shop trucks, $3,896. Washington, D.C., January 29th. The Senate today passed and sent to President Roosevelt a $909 million authorization for expanding naval construction facilities and building 400 new small craft for the Navy. Previously passed by the House, the bill authorizes $400 million for building the 400 small craft, including submarine chasers and minesweepers, $315 million to provide equipment and facilities for government and private shipbuilding plants, and $194 million for expansion of facilities manufacturing armor plate munitions and ordnance materials for the Navy. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, January 29th. The USS Marlin, 35th submarine built at the Portsmouth Navy Yard, was launched today. Mrs. John D. Wainwright, wife of the Commandant at the Yard, sponsored the craft. Washington, D.C., January 29th. The federal government, it was learned today, has instituted an aggressive drive to have United States firms house clean their Latin American branches of all anti-American or pro-Axis personnel. Convinced by confidential reports of widespread subversive activities in most of the Latin American republics, State Department agencies are applying diplomatic pressure to enlist the help of export industries in combating the situation. The campaign, it was learned, already has brought about the discharge of a number of agents and employees suspected of hostile allegiance and operations. Washington, D.C., January 29th. The Army Air Corps has called upon the Civil Service Commission to provide ground crews for 50,000 planes in 1942. Commissioner Arthur S. Fleming told the House Subcommittee on Appropriations there are now 8,000 civilians employed as mechanics in the Air Corps and that 20,000 more will be needed to take care of plane servicing next year. At the same time, he said the Navy's figures indicated that during the 1942 fiscal year, 8,000 additional civilian workers will be needed to take care of operations at air bases. Los Angeles, California, January 29th. Lieutenant Joe K. Ellsworth, U.S. Army, reported the theft of papers he said contained secret tactical data on anti-tank gunnery and new military regulations. The papers were taken from his automobile last night during a stopover here en route from Fort Benning, Georgia to Fort Lewis, Washington. Panama City, Panama, January 29th. Captain Robert Bennett, 29 years old, of Fort Worth, Texas, a West Point graduate of 1938, was found shot dead today in the Signal Corps warehouse at Fort Davis. Officers at the port said he had been ill several weeks ago in a Cologne hospital, but had fully recovered. He was understood to have been intending to be married next month. He had been in Panama since last September 17th. He was in charge of the warehouse, and officers said his affairs and accounts were in perfect order. New York, January 29th. A new chapter in the year-long investigation of Murder Incorporated, the Brooklyn ring accused of 83 underworld slayings, opened today when a steam shovel turned up the lime-encased body of a man believed to have been Peter Ponto, a foe of racketeering longshoremen. District Attorney William O'Dwyer of Brooklyn, under whose direction the workmen unearthed the body near Lyndhurst, New Jersey, has said that if he could find Panto's body, he was prepared to prosecute the murderers whose identity O'Dwyer knows. Panto is believed to have been slain because he led a rank-and-file movement against extortion and kickback methods of gangsters along the Brooklyn waterfront. His disappearance has been the subject of mass meetings by longshoresmen. Minneapolis, Minnesota, January 29th. 6 grade school boys, each 11 years old, decided to play a joke on a substitute teacher by causing themselves to fall asleep in class. Each swallowed a tablet from a bottle one of the boys had brought from home, believing it to be a sleeping medicine. They were delighted at first with the attention they received when one, asked why he was pacing the floor, answered in mock seriousness, "You'd be nervous if you had just taken poison." Then things began to happen. Parents, physicians, and the school nurse were summoned. An ambulance rushed them to General Hospital for emetics. It was disclosed that what the boys thought were harmless sleeping tablets were emergency heart stimulants containing a dangerous poison. Physicians said one could have induced convulsions in a child, and an overdose might have proved fatal. Washington, D.C., January 29th. Representative Fred Bradley, Republican, Michigan, today was informed an airplane would be assigned to Traverse City, Michigan, about March 1st in an effort to get the OR fleet going as soon as possible. There is a terrific demand for the OR in connection with the National Defense Program, Bradley said. Captain L.T. Chalker of the Coast Guard wrote Bradley that one of the first duties of the plane will be the obtaining of full information on ice conditions and keeping steamship companies advised of them in order to expedite the early opening of navigation this spring. It was hoped to get the boats out by April 1st with the help of the airplane spotting movement of ice fields, Bradley added. Washington, D.C., January 29th. The average American is 28.9 years old, the Census Bureau reported today after studying a 5% sample of the 1940 census. The figures showed that the population is growing older. In 1940, the average American was 2.5 years older than in 1930 and 6 years older than in 1900. Men continued to predominate, but the Bureau found that the margin of males over females was declining. Someday, it was said, women would outnumber men in America as they do in Europe and other areas of older civilizations. There were 101.1 males for every 100 females in 1940. 10 years ago, there were 102.5 males for every 100 females. The nation grew older, the Bureau added, but a decline in the number of persons under 20 years, a small increase in those between 20 and 45, and a large increase in those 65 or older. The Bureau estimated that the number of persons 65 or older increased from 6,633,805 in 1930 to 8,956,206 in 1940. Washington, D.C., January 29th. Anna Sklepovich, a shy schoolgirl of Gary, West Virginia, received a letter from a White House secretary congratulating her on her 14th birthday tomorrow, since it falls on the same day as President Roosevelt's 59th. But some prankster, she suspects her brother Steve, had opened the letter first and added a postscript suggesting she visit the president. In high excitement, Anna traveled the 400 miles here by train and went immediately to the White House. From brusque officers who sent her to a receiving home, she learned she was the victim of a cruel joke. But the president read about her in a newspaper and decided to turn the tables. At his direction, she was brought to visit him. Now in the manner of a Cinderella, she has been established in a luxurious room in one of Washington's finest hotels. Chaperoned by a policewoman, she will attend a series of presidential birthday balls tomorrow night and see movie stars and Capitol celebrities. And now for local and regional news. Citizen demands that Congress keep this nation out of the European war passed the million mark last night in the two offices of two Chicago organizations. Messages and petitions against war and against President Roosevelt's dictator bill were still pouring into the headquarters of these groups, the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee and the Citizens Keep Out of War Committee. Each group reported receipt of more than 500,000 names and of petitioners urging that the United States keep out of war. Other developments during the day in the growing protest movement against America's drift toward war were, number one, General Robert E. Wood, acting national chairman of the America First Committee, warned a radio audience that the sending of supplies to Europe, convoyed by the American Navy, would mean certain war. He asserted that President Roosevelt's war dictatorship bill should be defeated and that American people should not be driven by propaganda-raised fear to the suicidal course of war. Number two, Brigadier General Thomas S. Hammond, chairman of the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee, declared that women will be the determining factor in deciding whether the United States is to commit national suicide by entering the European conflict. He spoke at a meeting of the Illinois Federation of Women's Clubs in the Hotel Sherman. Number three, 50 state leaders of the American War Veterans Organizations met in the offices of the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee and resolved to organize the veterans into a body endorsing the stand against war. Number four, final arrangements were made to accommodate more than 5,000 persons at a labor rally tonight sponsored by the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee in Carmen's Hall, 328 South Ashland Avenue. Chicago working men and women will be given an opportunity to voice their opposition to any step which might take the country into war. If the people of the United States are to make sacrifices which war or total defense require and hold out to the end, there must be a complete clarification of the issues involved, Dr. Robert M. Hutchins, president of the University of Chicago, declared yesterday. He spoke at a luncheon of 500 members of the Chicago Association of Commerce in the Palmer House as part of the university's 50th anniversary celebration. Among the questions to be answered, he said, are, is Hitler wrong? If so, why? What is democracy? Is it the best form of government? Have we got it in this country? And if not, why not? Unless we have a clear and defensible convictions on these questions, Hutchins said, all the material in the world will not save us. Hutchins also warned that our educational system must not be scrapped in building up our defenses. Joseph W. Cox, commander of the Advertising Men's Post of the American Legion, announced yesterday that reservations are available in room 441 at the Hotel Sherman for the debate at a luncheon next Monday on What Now, America. General Robert E. Wood, acting national chairman of the America First Committee, and Ernest W. Gibson, former senator from Vermont and head of the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies, will debate the question. The debate is sponsored by the Advertising Men's Post. The system used by the government in classifying selective service registrants for military training has proved confusing to many Chicagoans, draft officials said yesterday. They stated that scores of inquiries have been received asking for an explanation of the method. The government uses numerals to designate the four major classes into which the registrants are classified according to availability for service. Letters of the alphabet are used to designate subdivisions of the four major classes. The classes and subdivisions with an explanation of each follow. Class 1, 1A, available, fit for general military service. 1B, available, physically fit for only limited military service. 1C, a member of the land or naval forces of the United States, including National Guard and various reserve organizations. 1D, student, college or university, fit for general military service, available not later than July 1st, 1941. 1E, student, physically fit for only limited military service, available not later than July 1st, 1941. Class 2, 2A, man necessary in his civilian occupation. Class 3, 3A, man deferred because of dependence. Class 4, 4A, man who has completed military service and who has an honorable discharge from such service. 4B, official deferred by law, Vice President of the United States, members of Congress, state governors, state legislators, judges, Coast Guardsmen, etc. 4C, non-declarant alien, registrants who are aliens and have not filed declaration of intention to become citizens. 4D, minister of religion or divinity student. 4E, conscientious objector, available only for civilian work of national importance. 4F, the physically, mentally, and morally unfit, men convicted of treason or a felony come under this classification. Also, men dishonorably discharged from the armed forces. Draft officials reported yesterday that 1,864 Cook County draftees were inducted into the Army during January at the induction depot in the 122nd Field Artillery Armory, 234 East Chicago Avenue. Army physicians and psychiatrists who examined the draftees rejected 422 other Cook County men for physical reasons. Married draftees were found to be more healthy than unmarried ones. More men, 128, were rejected for bad teeth than for any other reason. The second most important cause for rejection was mental maladjustment. On this ground, 101 were rejected. Captain Charles C. Baczynski, medical officer in charge of the depot, said 987 of the Cook County men accepted for training were draft volunteers, men who elected to take their Army service immediately rather than wait for their order numbers to be called. The rest of the Cook County group were regular draftees. 50 of the draftees were married men. Only 2% of these men were rejected for physical reasons, while more than 19% of the unmarried draftees were rejected for such reasons. In addition to the 1,864 Cook County men inducted during January, 168 men from other counties in this area were accepted for Army training. New York, January 29th. Amid much clamor for pavements in the name of national defense, Otto A. Milburn of Rockford, Illinois, president of the Illinois Road Builders Association, introduced a resolution at the 38th Annual Convention of the American Road Builders Association here this afternoon, urging that the present highway system be protected from undue excitement. In Illinois, said Mr. Milburn, the precarious condition of state highway finances illustrates my point. The most important cross-state routes are deteriorating and becoming outmoded 5 times as fast as slab replacements and modernization. In cities including Chicago, the inadequacy of existing pavements is becoming more acute. These problems must not be neglected while so much emphasis is being placed on military preparedness. Tonight, at an annual banquet of the road builders, Governor Murray D. Van Wagoner of Michigan, former president of the organization, recommended urban superhighway construction as a national defense measure. Springfield, Illinois, January 29th. The full measure of Republican control of both houses of the Illinois General Assembly was emphasized today with the appointment of the standing committees of the state Senate. The GOP took over the House of Representatives 2 years ago, therefore the committee assignments there did not show a great change. But there was cause for a hearty post-election party chortle when the Senate replaced Democratic chairmen and majorities on all committees with Republicans. Some changes looking solely to efficiency were made in both houses. Lieutenant Governor Hugh W. Cross and Majority Leader Arnold P. Benson reduced the number of Senate committees from 35 to 28. Speaker Elmer J. Schnackenberg reduced the size of many cumbersome bodies, allotting 7 places on each to Republicans and 5 to Democrats. The reductions eliminated a total of 110 committee memberships. Springfield, Illinois, January 29th. A parole reform demanded for years and which would have been in effect now except for an executive veto was proposed to the legislature today under joint Republican and Democratic sponsorship. Its major provision would permit trial judges in criminal cases to fix minimum and maximum sentences within the limits of the Indeterminate Sentence Act. Senator Harold G. Ward of Chicago, Democrat Majority Leader in the upper chamber, and Mayor Edward J. Kelly's legislative spokesman, who has been a longtime co-sponsor of the bill, reintroduced it today, coincident with its presentation in the House by Governor Dwight Green's floor leader, Representative Frederick W. Rennick, Republican Buddha. Springfield, Illinois, January 29th. The House, after several hours of argument today, sent to third reading the bill pegging the Chicago Board of Education's tax levy at $52 million for 1941, 42, and 43. The roll will be called tomorrow on the third reading, the passage stage, and indications are that the measure will be passed with the 102 votes necessary to make it effective immediately. The bill passed the Senate last week. James B. McCahey, president of the school board, outlined the bill before the House, sitting as a committee of the whole. He declared the bill to be of an emergency nature and that the board will be without funds on February 1st unless it is passed. McCahey said the board managed to pay teachers' salaries for January only by not paying bills for supplies. He explained that the pegged levy had been limited to 3 years following a conference with Governor Dwight Green. Springfield, Illinois, January 29th. Another batch of bills were presented in both houses of the legislature today. Some of them, with their sponsors, are digested below in the House. Edward Hayne, Democrat, Ottawa, would make it unlawful for buses carrying 7 or more passengers to travel on highways unless they are capable of attaining a speed of 28 miles on a 7% upgrade. William J. Lawler, Republican, Springfield, and W.O. Edwards, Democrat, Danville, railroad full crew bill. Edward P. O'Grady, Democrat, Chicago, would prohibit employers from refusing to employ persons solely because they were more than 45 years old. Paul Powell, Democrat, Vienna, would impose a tax of 5 cents per barrel upon the production of each person engaged in the business of producing oil, receipts to be earmarked for old age assistance. Paul Powell, Democrat, Vienna, would impose a tax of, we read that already, but they put it in here twice. Digest of bills introduced in the Senate. Richard J. Daley, Democrat, Chicago, would repeal 3-day notice of intention bill substituting a 1-day wait after marriage license is attained. William A. Wallace, Democrat, Chicago, would invalidate any deed that discriminates because of race or color. Representative Edward P. Saltiel, Republican, Chicago, sponsored a bill seeking authorization for the Chicago Board of Education to operate a 4-year college course rather than the 2-year junior college courses now permitted. Springfield, Illinois, January 29th. As the House of Representatives was about to adjourn today, Representative Charles J. Jenkins, Republican, Chicago, one of the Negro members, protested immediate consideration of a resolution sent over from the Senate which praised the 40-year career of Professor Austin Harding, director of the University of Illinois Band. Professor Harding, Jenkins declared, has been director of the band for almost 40 years, but not once has he seen fit to include a colored student in the band despite their preeminent musical ability. I don't say now that I will not vote for this resolution eventually, but I think it should have the committee consideration accorded most other resolutions. 6,500 employees of the International Harvester Company's tractor works at 2600 West 31st Street were thrown out of work yesterday by a strike called by Local 101 of the Farm Equipment Workers Organizing Committee, a CIO affiliate. The walkout stopped production on Army tractors worth several $million. There was a sharp interchange of notes by union officials and executives of the company as to the blame for the defense delay. Grant Oakes, chairman of the FEWOC, said the company had refused to commit itself on the union's demands and proposed endless conferences. He added, from the fact that the company's German and French plants are producing for European belligerents, plus the fact that the company has refused decent wages to its employees, we can conclude only that the corporation regards defense orders on a strictly business basis. 6 months ago, a dark-eyed girl of 16 vanished from New York. Then her florist father discovered that $4,700 was missing from the tin can he used for a bank. In spite of a nationwide search for the girl, Lino Culinelli is still missing. But a gangling, blonde-thatched boy bandit in Cook County Jail last night told a strange story in which he attempted to explain the first days of her disappearance. The story told how he eloped with her to Philadelphia in a taxi cab and helped her spend $2,000 within a few days. After a trip to New York, he said he returned to find Lino missing again. The bandit is Kenneth Watson, age 19, a tap dancer from the Bronx. He was found guilty of larceny by Judge John Sabaro last Monday after he had confessed a toy gun holed up in a gasoline station at 7336 Exchange Avenue last October. Watson, using the name of Rogers, was awaiting investigation of his plea for probation when Richard Devine, Assistant State's Attorney, accused him yesterday of being wanted in New York under the name of Watson. The bandit confessed his identity and then told this story. Last May, I decided to run away. I told Lino, a girl I had known for 4 years. She offered to go with me. One day she gave me a wad of her father's dough. A few days later, on July 21st, I asked her to go to the New York World's Fair. Her mother sent Lino's brother, Robert 14, along. Lino took the rest of the $4,700 from the tin can. We spent $500 at the fair. When we got back to her home, she kissed her brother goodbye and told him to pass the kiss along to her mother. She and I took a taxi cab to Philadelphia. We moved into a hotel. Next day, we went to a higher-priced one. She had given me $1,000 altogether by this time. We bought a lot of clothes and went sightseeing. I wanted to go back to New York for a few days. She gave me $1,000 more. I spent most of it in New York. When I got back to Philadelphia, she had checked out of the hotel. I came to Chicago and got mixed up with a stick-up gang. New York police said last night that they had suspected Lino and Watson had run away together. They have had Hollywood, California police looking for Lino. An inquest into the death of Gerhard Anderson, 60 years old, who died Tuesday while waiting in the county building to be transferred to Alimony Row of the county jail, was continued until February 19th yesterday to await completion of the analysis of vital organs by the coroner's chemist. Dr. Paul G.F. Schmidt, coroner's physician, said in his opinion Anderson's death was caused by poison. He submitted a report indicating there had been no heart or other organic ailment. Joseph D. Leo, a deputy bailiff, testified that he found a 3-ounce bottle containing strong-smelling liquid in the sheriff's lockup where Anderson died. Anderson had been ordered to Alimony Row by Judge Cornelius J. Harrington for contempt of court because of $1,680 arrears in temporary alimony due his wife, Annie, 2240 Granville Avenue. A holdup victim was joined yesterday by 2 detectives, 2 patrolmen, a traffic policeman, and a passerby, and together they caught the bandit a few moments after he held up a hat store at 126 West Madison Street. The chase was over in a hurry because the victim is a former city playground track star, and one of the policemen is the department's sprint champion. The bandit, who gave his name as Joseph Spence, took $18 from Edward Hyman, manager of the store, then ran as Hyman began shouting for help. Hyman, holder of several medals for the 100-yard and 220 dash, followed. Policeman John Johnson, on traffic duty at LaSalle and Madison Streets, fell behind Hyman. Police wagonmen and Thomas Wands and William Fuller, the department's sprint king of the Central Station, who were on their way to pick up a drunk, left the patrol and joined the chase. Detectives Edward Dennis and Lawrence Podesta, waiting at 24 South Wells Street with the drunk, left him as they heard Johnson fire a warning shot. Spence was finally run down at Washington and Wells Streets. Albert C. Ludich, age 60, of 4615 Grand Avenue, Western Springs, a Chicago Surface Lines supervisor, helped the posse by spreading his arms and gathering the bandit in. When the winded bandit got his breath, he said he had held up the store and committed 12 other robberies to get money for clothing for his wife and infant daughter living in Chatham, Michigan. He admitted, though, that in the last 6 months he had sent them only $20. A card found on Spence showed that he had been placed on probation October 16th for passing bad checks. He said this also was done for the wife and child. A toy revolver was found on him. 2 other men, Bert Jacobson, 949 Madison Street, which Spence also gave as his address, and Robert Sherlock, 109 West Elm Street, were arrested later as robbery accomplices. And the drunk? He waited patiently until detectives Dennis and Podesta came back for him. Petitions requesting cancellation of the American citizenship of 2 former members of the German-American Bund who have returned to Germany were on file yesterday in federal court. Those named are Alfred Ernst Willy Bennen, who formerly lived at 2125 School Street, and Rudolph Karl Roper, formerly of 1325 North Waller Avenue. 9 prisoners left the county jail for Joliet Penitentiary yesterday, including 3 sentenced for the 9,174 payroll robbery last July 19th of Harry Walsh, chief guard for the Chicago Tribune. The 3 are Peter Allegretti and Anthony Lulo, who received terms of a year to life, and Neo Rizzo, sentenced to 1 to 10 years. The first 2 pleaded guilty of robbery recently before Judge Julius H. Minor in criminal court. Rizzo, who pointed out the Tribune car to the others, was found guilty of larceny. Walsh was shot several times when he sought to protect the payroll. Harold Kirk, 45 years old, the Alimony Row prisoner who was discovered recently to be wanted in California on a 16-year-old murder charge, was turned over to Sheriff Emmett L. Shea of San Bernardino County, California, by an order of Judge Cornelius J. Harrington in Circuit Court yesterday. Sheriff Shea planned to leave today with his prisoner. Kirk faces prosecution for the murder in 1924 of James Wynn, a taxicab driver. A guarantee was received from California authorities that Kirk's return fare to Illinois will be paid if he is acquitted. Police from the Commissioner's Office and the Detective Bureau late last night closed the Waldman Tavern at 164 North Michigan Avenue and arrested Albert Waldman, the owner, 2 employees, and 9 male patrons. Sergeant Frank O'Sullivan of the Commissioner's Office said he will recommend revocation of the license. The detectives made the arrests, they said, after observing the conduct of some of the male patrons. The federal grand jury returned 18 indictments yesterday, charging 33 sugar dealers, cookers, helpers, truck drivers, and distributing agents with violation of alcohol tax laws. The massed indictments are the second major attack on the new type bootleggers. 2 weeks ago, 35 men were indicted in New York. Of these, 21 were Chicagoans. J. Albert Wohl, United States Attorney, said the new indictments are only the beginning of vigorous prosecutions, which will be continued until the bootlegging business is stamped out. How profitable the business is was described by Martin S. Gerber, Assistant United States Attorney. Legitimate alcohol of the grade turned out in the stills bears a tax of about $5 a gallon. Profits to those who evade the tax are as much as 200 to 300% of the cost of production, which is about $1 a gallon. The stills operated by the defendants produced enough in the few days they operated to deprive the government of $2 million in taxes. David Schneider, 54 years old, 5112 Strong Street, a coal hiker, died in Swedish Covenant Hospital yesterday of injuries incurred January 21st when he was crushed by a truck backing into the yards of a coal company at 5838 North Pulaski Road. Up to 4 p.m. yesterday, 77 persons had been killed in Cook County traffic since January 1st. Of these, 58 died in Chicago, where 1,747 were injured during the same period. Los Angeles, California, January 29th. The metropolitan Los Angeles area was jolted late today by a sharp earthquake lasting about 10 seconds. No property damage nor loss of life was reported. The shock began at 7:34 p.m. Chicago time and was felt in Alhambra, San Gabriel, Monrovia, Glendale, Monterey Park, Temple City, Santa Monica, Pasadena, Hollywood, Arcadia, and on the Los Angeles County coastline. An allocation of $1,500,000 for the Chicago Housing Authority was included yesterday in $49,862,000 earmarked for such projects throughout the country by the United States Housing Authority at Washington, D.C. No details were made public as to where the money would be expended in Chicago. Milton Schufro of the Information Service of the local authority said, however, that the $1,500,000 might be used for expansion of the North Side housing project at Larrabee Division and Sedgwick Streets. Other such projects in the city are the Julia Lathrop homes at Diversey Parkway and the River, and Jane Addams homes at Roosevelt Road and Racine Avenues, and the Ida B. Wells homes bounded by 35th and 39th Streets and Cottage Grove Avenue and South Parkway, and the Trumbull Park homes at South Chicago. The proposed ordinance to tax farmers and dairies for milk inspections is to be shelved. Announcements to this effect were made last night by both Mayor Kelly and Alderman Joseph C. Ross, 40th Ward, chairman of a city council subcommittee which prepared the measure. Fees provided in the proposal would have brought the city about $350,000 annually. Ross said he will recommend to the Finance Committee early next week that the ordinance be filed. Mayor Kelly said that after a conference with Ross, he recommended it be temporarily shelved. The measure was protested vigorously by farmers, dairies, and the local federal milk administrator of the Department of Agriculture. Several farmer groups threatened milk strikes. The government administrator said such an ordinance would disrupt the milk industry. Dealers said the tax would be passed on to the consumer as an increase in milk prices. Chicago's 14-year attempt to establish a modern unified local transportation system will be dealt the stiffest jolt in more than a year this morning when a 7-man board representing the city's transit lines will make an uncompromising report to federal judge Michael L. Igo. The federal court has jurisdiction over the transit lines. The 7 representatives have been negotiating with city officials since December 1939 in an attempt to agree on a unified traction franchise. The franchise would set up a single transit company to undertake the long-delayed purchase of modern transit cars and buses. Another child, a daughter, was born yesterday to Mr. and Mrs. Louis Brenecka, whose farm home is on Route 173 west of Hebron in McHenry County. Her advent raised the total of the children of the couple to 18, 9 boys and 9 girls. A 19th child died in infancy. Brenecka is 53 years old and his wife, who was married at 16, is 43. The eldest son, Henry, is 26. And in sports, Champaign, Illinois, January 29th. Walt Hoot Evers, forward, and Henry Sox, guard, were missing from the University of Illinois lineup when the Illini defeated the National University of Mexico 53-30 tonight. Both became scholastically ineligible for this game and the Purdue game at Lafayette Monday night, at least. Competition in remaining Big Ten games depends upon their obtaining permission to take and pass the customary special examinations accorded any student recommended for the additional test. However, Evers, who is also an outfielder on the baseball team, is reported undecided whether to remain in the university or enter professional baseball. Several big league teams, including Detroit, are said to be interested in him. Evers planned to go home to Collinsville to discuss his future with his parents. Evers, who led Illini basketball scorers with 42 points in 4 Big Ten Conference games, batted .353 last season. He led the Big Ten in runs batted in with 16, scored the most runs, 20, and had the most total bases, 33, which included 5 triples and 3 home runs. The Chicago Bruins, with center Mike Novak leading the way, won their third straight National Basketball League game, a 31-22 triumph over the Sheboygan Redskins in the 132nd Regiment Armory last night. 3,500 fans saw the Bruins take the lead at the start and hold it all the way. Their halftime margin was 19-14. The victory moved the Bruins into a tie with Sheboygan for third place in the standings. The Chicago club was without the services of Wibbs Couts, its leading scorer, who is in bed recovering from an attack of the flu. Novak took his place, however, by scoring 6 baskets and 2 free throws. The Chicagoans continued their great free throwing in this contest, making their first 7 shots before missing an attempt. Otto Kolar, captain of the Redskins and a native of Cicero, was presented with a traveling bag by his Windy City friends. The Palmer House Panthers defeated the Bronzeville Merchants 21-13 in a Windy City League game which opened the program. In the only other National Basketball League game, Detroit beat Oshkosh 36-34. New York, January 29th. The Chicago Blackhawks, who haven't won a National Hockey League game from the New York Americans in Madison Square Garden for 4 years, will try for the 14th time tomorrow night to end one of the strangest jinxes in Major League sports. The Hawks arrived today from Boston, where they took a 3-2 lacing last night from the Bruins, who haven't been beaten in their last 14 games. The last time the Hawks won a league game from the Americans in New York was on January 26, 1937, and they made it a memorable occasion by trouncing the New Yorkers 9-0. New York, January 29th. If Joe Louis has a sense of humor, he will have cause to emit a few chuckles between tonight and Friday evening when he makes the 13th defense of his heavyweight championship. Opponent number 13 is Clarence Red Berman of Baltimore, Maryland, and the place is Madison Square Garden. The scheduled bout is 15 rounds. The 48 hours preceding Lewis's championship adventures always followed the same pattern. A last-minute buildup of his opponent. This one coming up is no different. Jack Dempsey is the old heavyweight champion who is always ready to help in a good cause. Today took the platform for Bauman, with whom he has been remotely associated for several years. Detroit, Michigan, January 29th. Hank Greenberg's draft questionnaire is in the mail, officials of board number 23 said today, and the big Detroit Tiger outfielder will receive it in Honolulu, where he is on vacation. Though the questionnaires ordinarily must be returned in 5 days, the time is extended in cases where the person involved is absent from the city. Greenberg's number is 621, is expected to come up about June 1st. He has indicated he will not ask for deferment. And that is sports, and that is the news. Henry Chop reporting, Thursday, January 30th, 1941. Have a swell day.